Okay, at this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome. Individuals wishing to address the Board of Trustees are requested to complete a speaker card and deliver the card to the City Clerk staff prior to the item being heard by the Board of Trustees. Please observe a 3-minute limit for your communications, and once called upon to speak, we request that you state your name and city of residence for the record. Should we start with the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ideally,
Yes.
I'd like to do that.
Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance right now, and then we'll get into that. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. This portion of the agenda is intended for the general public comments only on items within the Board of Trustees jurisdiction that are not listed elsewhere on the agenda. Please note that the state law prohibits the Board of Trustees from discussing or taking action on these items. Please observe a 3-minute limit for your communications, and once called upon to speak, we request that you state your name and city of residence for the record. Ms. Edwards, are there any speaker cards from the public?
I do not have any speaker cards.
Okay, we'll move on to the meeting minutes. The approval, Ms. Edwards, let's talk about the approval of the minutes for the Pension Stabilization Trust Board of Trustees meeting on October 5th, 2023. Any speaker cards from the public on this meeting minutes?
I do not have any speaker cards.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion was made by Jacob Ellis, seconded by Kim Sitten, and let's go to the agenda items. So,
You have to vote on that, sorry.
Yep.
So all in favor of
All in
approval of the
favor.
minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion passes.
thank you, Sylvia. All right, moving on to the board meeting update and trust contribution recommendation discussion. I'm going to turn the time over to our finance director, Kim. Go ahead and present the item.
Thank you, Mr. Willardson. So this morning we are here to talk about three main topics: our board meetings and the Pension Stabilization Trust investment reports, unfunded liabilities and the pension management policy, and then the fiscal year 2023 general fund results and our trust contribution recommendations. So the ask today of the trustee board is to review the provided information and to discuss and provide direction on a recommendation for the trust contribution. So the trustee board meetings are held twice a year, and the purpose of those meetings is spelled out here on the slide. So in October, after we receive the new actuarial reports from CalPERS, staff reviews those and analyzes the information and then prepares the presentation to bring back to the board. And so our purpose of the October meeting is to discuss those results of the annual reports. And in January, of course, meeting here today, this is after the end of the year audit is completed, as well as the financial statements, and that's for us to take a look at our pension stabilization trust contribution recommendations to the City Council based on our end of the year surplus in the general fund, as well as the pension management policy. So the trust value as of the end of December is $33.2 million. The city has contributed a total of $32.1 million, so we have investment growth there of a little over $1.1 million. The first contribution to the trust was made in March of 2022, and that was a total of $30 million. On the city's website, under the finance department page, the monthly investment reports can be found, and those are posted there after they go to the city council. The pension trust investment reports are also part of that document. They can be found near the end of the file. Those reports are also located on the city council agendas, and they generally go to city council on the second meeting of the month. On the same webpage, you can also find the Pension Stabilization Trust investment policy. Now let's talk a little bit about the unfunded liabilities and the pension management plan. A lot of this information is going to be a repeat from October, but it's important to have this information in context when we start talking about a contribution for this fiscal year. So here's a snapshot of the unfunded liabilities and the funded ratios for the 4 different plans that the city has. You can see that the funded ratio ranges between 87.7% up to 92.8% for the various plans. And just as frame of reference, prior to the issuance of our pension obligation bonds, the funded ratios of the plans were somewhere between 65.6% and 90.3%. So our new unfunded accrued liabilities are assessed by CalPERS each fiscal year, and this table presented on this slide is part of our pension management policy. The policy was established to address any future unfunded liabilities, as we knew that the pension, after the pension obligation bonds were issued. Clearly, we did not anticipate there being a new assessed UAL of $81.8 million when taking in this information, when creating it.
We thought we accounted for all the possibilities.
We did, yes.
We didn't plan on 82 million in 1 year instead of our max of 15 million that we thought could be worst case.
Correct. But since this is the first year that we've received a UAL assessment from CalPERS after the POBs, we'll take a look at this for the next 2 years and then evaluate if we need to make any changes to the policy. We don't want to overreact and change the policy after this 1 year. So there are multiple factors that impact the unfunded liability and the employer's contributions. This CalPERS has 2 sources of income, their investment earnings and then contributions that are received from both employees and employers. So you can see here the investment income. The current estimated discount rate is 6.8%. It's also known as the estimated rate of return. And in fiscal year 2022, the results were a negative 6.1%. So it's basically 12.9% difference from where we thought we'd be to what they actually received. And then the fiscal year 2023 results were better in a positive area. They were 5.8%, but still 1% less than what CalPERS had estimated. And that information will be reflected in next year's report. So we know we'll see even more of an assessment that gets added on next year. Other factors that impact the UAL are member demographics for both active and retired people in our plans, salary increases, and then any other actuarial assumption changes such as the mortality rates. For instance, in fiscal year 21, there were higher mortality rates due to COVID, and that's something that CalPERS had to bring into their evaluation process. So this table represents the CalPERS investment returns over a longer term period. One thing to emphasize is that while the returns in the last 2 years have fallen short, if we go back even 1 year further in fiscal year 2021, which isn't reflected on this slide, CalPERS had positive returns of 21.3%. So what CalPERS does is it takes a longer look at their investment returns, and they look over 20 to 30 years. In September, CalPERS hosted an employer leadership dialogue, and they provided some additional information on their rate of return. And based on their perspective, the projected 20-year rate of return is estimated to be 6.2 to 7.9%, with 7% as their median. So that's why they continue to use the 6.8 and don't feel any changes to that rate are needed at this time. The board did meet in November of 2023 and did not change their estimated rate of return. So they said that will hold then for another 2 years before they go back and revisit that estimate. So the pension obligation bonds are callable after year 10. So after the payments made in May of 2031, then those items could be, that item could be paid off sooner than the 13-year payment plan that is currently established. And the goal in the pension management plan is to pay that off as quickly as possible, but to also balance that out with any new unfunded liabilities that we receive from CalPERS and the current operational and capital needs. So the current baseline amount that we're projecting to contribute each fiscal year to the trust is $2 million from Measure X. But if we would like to pay off the bonds within year 11, which is after that 10th payment, we would need to set aside $2.7 million. The 2.7 and then so minus the $2 million that we're already planning to contribute.
So it's not 2.7 on top of the 2.
Correct. It's
700,000 extra.
Extra, correct.
Okay.
If we want to pay that off in year 12, we would need $500,000 set aside in the trust. We're already covered with that by that $2 million that we're putting aside or planning to put aside. So you can see if we just simply did the $2 million per year, we'd be somewhere between 11 and 12 is when we could pay that off.
Do we know from when we put the money in until now, I can't do the math in my head, did we get a 5% return on it as we have been using as our assumption?
More than that?
Yeah.
All right, so we're on track. Okay, good.
And so then if we wanted to pay it off at year 13, which is the end of the current payment schedule, we would need to not add any additional funds to the trust contribution or to the trust. So now actually keeping that in mind, the $2.7 million per year as we move into the discussion about what we would like to contribute for this next fiscal year. We have 3 options presented for the board's consideration. In fiscal year 2023, the general fund surplus was $18.6 million. So option 1 is to contribute that $2 million baseline amount that I discussed from Measure X. And then from the general fund surplus, add another $700,000 to get us to that 2.7, like we said, to pay off in year 11. And then to do like a catch-up provision. In last fiscal year, we did not contribute the full 2.7 because we only had,
Partial year.
yeah, we only had a smaller savings in the general fund, so we only did 2.1. So we figured out if we had contributed the full 2.7 and the interest earned versus what we did contribute in the interest earned, we'd need to add about another $650,000 to catch up to for last fiscal year's contribution. So if that's the option that we want to present to the City Council, that contribution would be $3.35 million, $2 million from Measure X, and $1.35 from the general fund surplus. Option 2 would be the baseline from Measure X, and to contribute $3.4 million from general fund surplus, which is very similar to option 1, but then adding on one more full year just to get us a year ahead in terms of adding money to the contribution in case there's any future fiscal years where money's tight and don't have the funds to do so. That total contribution would be $6.05 million, $2 million from Measure X, and $4.05 from general fund. And then option 3 is the baseline for Measure X, and then any amount above $3.4 million that the board would like to discuss. And that total contribution then would be to be determined based on our discussion. So the ask of the board is that we discuss and provide direction on the recommendation for the trust contribution. And with that, I will go back to the slide for us to discuss.
So can I restate?
Yes,
Option 1 keeps us on track with our original plan.
correct,
Option 2 not only keeps us on track, but actually puts us 1 year ahead.
correct.
Okay. I understand.
With the in case in a future year we don't have the means to make that contribution. So it's just because we can't call the bonds any earlier. It would just be in case for some reason we had a bad year.
Yes,
We have an extra year.
In case
set
that
aside.
looming recession everyone keeps promising actually materializes.
yes, yes. And like we saw in last fiscal year, we had a much smaller general fund surplus to work with. And so that's why, just keeping that in mind that there will be years where money is a lot tighter. And so trying to think ahead of that. But not wanting to contribute to the trust, knowing that we have a lot of projects and capital needs that are upcoming here very quickly. And so not wanting to put too much aside too. My recommendation would be option number 2, and then we can discuss from there if anyone else would like to provide any other information. Based on our discussion here today, then I'll be preparing a staff report that will go to City Council, and we'll be getting their approval based on our discussion.
My thoughts were option number 2 sounds like a good plan.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's yet again a very fiscally conservative way of doing it to make sure that we're just staying ahead of the curve. And I like that more than going beyond that. To your point, Kim, is we got a ton of other things we need to spend money on, so I don't want to worry about a decade and a half from now too extensively, so that we don't take care of today's needs. But that's a very prudent, careful, and aggressive way to pay down our debt. So I like it. Works for me.
Yeah,
I agree.
okay?
Option 2 sounds good, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
You okay with
Brett?
that? Okay. Do we need to do a vote or anything on that, Sylvia? Or
No, we just provide direction.
So thank you very much. So based on that, like I said, I'll be preparing a staff report that'll go on the City Council agenda for February 7th. And then our next meeting of this board will be in October with a date to be determined once the CalPERS reports are received.
Excellent. On those fiscal year returns, those are not calendar year returns, right?
Fiscal year, correct.
So it's till June 30th.
They have the same fiscal year that we do. Yes,
so
July
that's
1
what I
through
thought.
June
Okay.
30. Yes.
I was going to say, because our returns will come in much better for this next fiscal year then.
That would be great.
Just because the markets are up a lot since July. Okay.
Not that CalPERS returns will be up because they seem
Yeah.
to defy all market logic. They just, no matter how good the market
Our
performs.
pension investment account returns will be up.
Yes, ours
Yeah.
will be good.
Yep.
It has to be, I checked it, it's over 8%.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, that's great.
I was going to say, I think it should be above double digits, I think. So we'll see.
That's great.
Okay, are there speaker cards from the public?
We do not have any speaker cards.
Okay, and any other comments or questions from our board?
Just great work, Kim.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Excellent. We'll go with option 2 and provide direction and see what the council says.
Okay.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.